where you're from and conscious of time. So let's get going. So what we want to talk about today is the very important topic, which seems to be coming up more and more in conversations with boards, more and more in conferences I've been attending, is the issue of mental health. And most importantly, in this context, how we manage that in the board in terms of our responsibility. Do we talk about it? Do we actually actively go and support our teams with the issue of mental health? What are we doing? What are we doing from a leadership perspective at board level? So for those of you who haven't heard of us before, Sirdar is the name for a lead Sherpa on a mountain expedition. From a work perspective, we focus on what happens in the boardroom, which is why we've decided to team up with Ask Me to help us understand how mental health works. But Sirdar is the name for the guide who takes the team up the mountain. So what we're trying to do is work with you and go with you on the journey rather than, as one of my colleagues said this afternoon, we don't climb to the top of the mountain, take a photograph and come back and give it to you. We also don't set you up at base camp, push you up the mountain and cheers and see you later. We want to go with you on the journey. So this is part of our responsibility to take you on that journey and make sure that you're, as a board, working more effectively. And specifically today, we want to talk about mental health. So with me today, I have Mene Hamel, who is, and we'll introduce you to her team in a second, from Ask Me. She's worked in human resources for over 15 years and as a consultant and training facilitator. And during that time became very much more interested in the psychology behind the workplace and the interactions and how that can impact on the team and individual performance. But it was in 2023, she experienced a bout of acute anxiety and stress, predominantly work-related, which resulted in her being hospitalized. So I think that's going to have an impact on anyone and wake them up to the fact that this is real. So she wanted to make a big difference, wanted to make some life changes, and has been on a journey of self-discovery, I guess, and learning how to heal yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally in terms of emotional well-being. So she's completed a course through Stellenbosch Business School on mental well-being in the workplace, which gave her a better understanding of the subject and inspired her to start her own business. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Mene and she can let us know how she got here and also introduce us to her team.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tim, and thank you for the opportunity. And from the get-go, I want to make it quite obvious that we are here to share, and it depends on your own level of comfort. But certainly myself, Jared, Tamara, we're here to share with you some of our own personal experiences because, Siddar leads you up that mountain, and I had so many people who were able to fool me or to catch me when I fell. But the journey of recovery is one where people are able to guide me, but I have to take the steps myself. So it's so wonderful that an organization such as Siddar is here and creates this platform for us to have an open, courageous conversation regarding the topic. So thank you for that. I'm joined by Jared, who is a very accomplished business professional and coach for over 20 years. And my colleagues certainly have a lot more years of experience, but Jared specifically assists businesses with the strategic and the engagement level with employees. And it's really around effectiveness. He's had a lot of success in working with leaders and management, and also from a personal perspective, looking at the organization, looking at organizational development. But his area of specialization is in stress and burnout and how we engage with staff regarding those matters. Tamara is a registered wellness counselor with the ASCHP, and she has to help me. ASCHP, Tamara?
Correct. It's the ASCHP. Yes, it's your holistic wellness counselors of South Africa.
You see, there we go. We're a great combination. And she holds a certification as an executive business coach, a master in neuro-linguistic programming. She also holds a master in that, and a practitioner and personal development coach. So we're joined by two colleagues that have years of experience in coaching individuals within this space as well. And there are a lot of available opportunities at the moment out there that assists us as individuals. But today specifically, we want to focus on the responsibility of the board, the role the board can play, as well as the senior leadership team in putting the correct framework in place. So it is about you. It's about you as the individual, and there are going to be helpful information and solutions and techniques that we will touch on today. But more so, it is about our ethical responsibility as a board and as an organization to ask the question, to consider the framework that needs to be put in place to take care of the employees that are within our employ. So it's about the individual, but more so about what we can do to ensure good and safe working spaces for our employees. So please feel free to engage with us via the chat box. We'll keep an eye on it. Virtual raised hands as well. And as I said, where you are comfortable to do so, please do add and share your own experiences. But I want to start off by asking you, are you sane? As you are sitting here today, joining the webinar, do you feel that you are in a mental space where you can say, yes, Monet, I am of sound mind. I do believe that I am rational in my thinking and current behavior. I have sound judgment and I can be trusted to make good decisions. So what is your sanity level at right now? And I can only imagine there may be some kids running around in the background because it's school holidays. So maybe your sanity is a little bit in question, or it's very busy in the work environment. But the question is, how sane are you? Because that's really what we're asking. And we all have different mental wellness periods. We all have mental health rather, and we all have different periods of mental illness. So even though you as an individual haven't perhaps been diagnosed formally previously by a health practitioner, it's very likely that you've experienced a period of mental illness, because it's all about our mental well-being, and that fluctuates depending on external and internal factors. So we have a quick poll. We would like to ask you, just to drive a little bit of interaction and to get a sense of the colleagues that have joined us, and the poll has popped up. Thank you. First of all, I just want to ask, do you currently feel overwhelmed at work? And this is anonymous, so please don't worry. We won't put your name next to any responses. But please, if you could partake in the poll. First question, do you currently feel overwhelmed at work? And then secondly, how comfortable will you feel to step away from work to take a break? So depending on where you are now, do you feel overwhelmed? How comfortable will you feel to step away to take a break from work? All right. My colleague Mukhali can just let me know if we are getting some responses there on our poll. And it is important again, because mental illness is something quite specific. And as I said, you go through perhaps a process of diagnosis, but mental well-being is equally important. And we want to prevent illness by focusing on preventative measures. So if there's a bout of unwellness and we don't feel that great, and we do feel overwhelmed, it's important that we are able to recognize it. And there's no shame in recognizing it. You know, we sometimes wear this badge to say, I'm a hard worker. I work 14, 18 hours a day. I don't take leave. I work on weekends. And it seems like in society, that has become a badge of honor. The more hours I put in, the quicker I respond to an email, the fact that I have email on my mobile phone, and that I'm working on a Sunday night. This makes me a brilliant leader. This makes me a brilliant employee, and I wear it proudly as a badge. But are we still then able to recognize that, listen, now I'm starting to go into a period where I'm overworked. I'm potentially going to burn out. Let me pause here and check if we are able to present any of those results from our poll. Do I need to maybe stop sharing? I think we're maybe just correlating, so we can always come back and just check it, how many people responded to that. But I'm certain it's going to be more than perhaps what we think. So we have to approach it holistically. And I want to take you to a great read from Bob Rosen, a book called Grounded, and you may be familiar with it already. But in this book, he really talks about the fact that a good leader needs to be very grounded. We are working in a space and at a pace right now. There we go. Thank you. Let's quickly go to that poll. Do you currently feel overwhelmed? Only 33%. That's great. How comfortable will you feel to take a step away? 60%. So we have very sound-minded colleagues here on the webinar, but we can still see that some of us not necessarily that comfortable to take a break. And that could be for various reasons, but I'm certain that that badge of honor and potentially some of that, the stigma around it or the expectations potentially plays a role here as to why we don't feel entirely comfortable to take away and to take a break. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. I'll close that on my side. So in this book, Bob Rosen talks about the fact that we need to be very grounded as individuals, as leaders, and that there is a holistic approach. He talks about physical health, he talks about emotional health and intellectual health, social health, and for some individuals that includes occupational health, but also spiritual health. And what stood out for me here is one excerpt from the book where he says, emotionally healthy leaders have a nimbleness that's evident in their reactions, thinking, and behavior. Leaders light on their feet emotionally are not derailed by unpredictability. When things go wrong, they manage their emotions, monitor how colleagues are faring, and try hard to make decisions that benefit the organization in the long term. And they cultivate this practice knowing that emotional health is a process, not a solid state. Now imagine this leader going through a period of uncertainty, going through a period of burnout, anxiety, chronic stress, depression. How nimble will our leader be if he or she is experiencing that mental state of not being able to perform optimally? And that is where, again, there's a responsibility of us in terms of this framework we want to introduce and place emphasis on. There must be a space to speak up. There must be a culture where the conversation is allowed, where the conversation is encouraged. Because I can continue to put up the facade, but am I truly a healthy leader in that moment? And if I don't have the options available to get support, I'm not going to be the leader I'm expected to be. All right, so a good read, and it ties in beautifully with the topic we want to discuss today.
Yeah, just Menno, before you move on, it's certainly something we're seeing more of with CEOs becoming highly stressed. And then you can see it looking outside in from a board perspective. They tend to get stuck and focusing on one or two things that they comfortable with, and they can almost do without thinking too much, and then you lose that nimbleness really quickly.
Absolutely. So let's move a little bit to the statistics. I don't think we have to do a lot of selling to our colleagues to really demonstrate the importance of the topic, but there are certainly some figures that are important and research being done in this space. Now, this is the 4th year that Sapien Labs have put out and published the mental health quotient. And it provides insight into the mental well-being of internet-enabled populations. So that's the first thing I do want to point out. It is internet-enabled populations around the globe. And you can see here in terms of the footprint of sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, Northern Africa, and into Europe, and also into the Northern America as well. So there are 71 countries that take part, and it assesses different elements to determine what is the spectrum, what is the score of a country on a scale that goes from distressed to thriving from a mental state point of view. Now, this mental health quotient has been reported on, and the latest report is 2023. That's very relevant. It's a latest report, so that's very helpful. But let's start by understanding where's the global mean score. The mean score sits at 65. Okay. And now we can, based on our participants, and I've included all the countries we anticipated participants are from in terms of registrations. Unfortunately, if I do go back quickly, sub-Saharan Africa, it covers Angola, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, DRC, Kenya, Mozambique, Nigeria, South Africa, Sudan, Tanzania, Zimbabwe. But it does give us at least that insight. So the mean score, 65. Who is below 65? Again, South Africa. South Africa has rated in the lowest scoring countries for as long as this report has existed. We have been in the bottom 3, 4 on this list for a number of years. So our latest score is only sitting at 50. Also below the mean score is India at 59. Angola just below the mean at 64. And then Mozambique is above at 70. Kenya starts to look even better at 72. United States 72. Zimbabwe 74. Nigeria 83. Tanzania 88. So we are still globally very much at the post-pandemic low, and there is no signs of moving to the pre-pandemic levels. So there's a continuation of the drastic drop in mental wellness, which was initially brought about by COVID and lockdown. And just jumping quickly to the very last slide, because I just wanted to, as additional reading, as to some of the why behind this global view, I just want to focus your attention to additional Sapiens Lab reports. And in those reports, these are 3 of the key findings that contribute to the overall mental state. The first detailed research was about younger age of first smartphone ownership. And now all the parents are going, I'm going to download this report because I'm a parent and I have young children. And I think it's certainly worth a read if you are a parent. Secondly, ultra-processed food consumption across the globe. And thirdly, diminished family bonds. Now, this is non-work related, but I think it's certainly important holistically to also look at some of the reasons why. Okay, and I've included, colleagues, anything with a link underlined in blue, obviously that denotes that it is a link that is clickable, and we've made it easy for you to get access to those various reports as well. If you want the full report with the full list of countries and their rankings, please feel free to download the full mental state of the world report by following that link. So we are positioning the prevalence of mental health conditions and illnesses with a specific focus on South Africa, an alarming statistic. This is based on research dated 2022, conducted by the WITS Medical Research Council and the DPHRU here. But the stat is that 25.7% of South Africans are likely depressed. And what they've done in this research is, which is quite helpful, they've actually broken down the prevalence per province in South Africa as well. So the darker the color, the more probable depression is in that province, and the lighter, the less likely. What they also focused on is adverse childhood experiences that impacts the likelihood or the prevalence of depression. Again, it's not only focused on adults, but again, it gives us an indication of both where our youth is also moving towards, because remember, our future labor force is today's youth. Our future labor force is today's youth. And if that report from Sapiens Lab is telling us that the earlier children, youth pick up telephones, the more likely it could lead to mental conditions, this topic is not going away. This is going to garner more and more focus, and it's going to require more solution-driven strategies to be implemented, because we are inheriting a generation that has a higher likely probability of depression and mental conditions than what older generations are experiencing currently in the workplace. So we always say our children are so resilient, the youth are so resilient, but I'm not so certain if that rings true that much anymore. So we need to democratize access. Now, what does that mean? It means that solutions and support needs to be available to all people, irrespective of seniority, irrespective of their level of education and qualifications, irrespective of language, of culture, of ability. We have to ensure that the solution and support offered for one is same and similar offered to anybody else. It speaks to the equality. Now, again, in South Africa, we have the Employment Equity Act. We have similar pieces of legislation in other countries that speaks to equality. And that principle needs to be extended to how we support our individuals in terms of their mental well-being in the workplace. Another alarming stat, 1 out of 6 South African employees are likely to disclose their mental health conditions. So it's a question of the prevalence, but the other challenge is, how do we encourage employees to disclose? And again, I think what is important is that we create that culture where leaders are willing to speak about it, where leaders, where appropriate, are willing to share experiences. Because I promise you, if my leaders were more open, or if I felt that they would be more willing to listen to my stresses and the fact that I was declining and I was heading down a burnout, then I would have spoken up. But my culture, and I do love the culture I was in and the people, but my culture was the badge of honor. If you weren't working on a Sunday night, something was wrong. Why aren't you working? That was the culture I found myself in. I didn't dare speak up because that's the way we are. That's the dedication of the type of person that works in that organization. So it was nothing to do with the individuals. It was about the unwritten rules, the culture that existed, that I found myself in, that I did not feel like I was able to disclose, to speak up. Okay, let's watch this video. And from the team, maybe just a thumbs up if all is good in terms of audio.
Hi, I'm Lihan, and I'm Chinese Australian.
Hi, I'm Emmanuel, and I'm from West Africa, Ghana.
Hi, I'm Anas, and I'm Muslim South African.
It's not something that's really spoken of, because it's believed like it's a bad omen, and it's actually believed that you might become single forever. That if you talk about stuff like that, so you're not actually allowed to. It's slowly getting there, but it's a very hard topic to talk to, especially in the open.
The youth in my community, they have kind of more of an understanding because it's becoming more and more open. As I've started to discover myself and learn to cope with my mental health issues, I've also had friends come up to me and they tell me about their mental health issues because they feel like I understand them, or that I won't judge them because they're worried that their parents would judge them. So I've had like a lot of challenges, but as well a lot of support.
For me, I think I speak Chinese at home, but my Chinese isn't obviously the best, so I lack the language a lot of times to explain to people in my community, to talk about different experiences. So then you resort to take like depression, for example, like the only words you know are like sad, so it's hard to describe that language. But aside from that, I think it's definitely taboo to still talk about mental health, but it's getting better. I think that people are acknowledging that a lot of people go through mental health struggles, so by talking about it more, it's less taboo and people can develop the vocab for it and have the conversations about it.
Or when there's a soccer match, you see everyone comes in the community and then we all be jubilant and then we'll be dancing and everyone forgets about their indifferences and we all join arms together and celebrate at the moment at that time. So that's one of our strengths. And another strength of my community is resilience. Despite all the challenges that we've been through or any adversity that comes to us, we try to bounce back. So that's one of the strengths that I'm very proud of my community.
I feel like my community isn't tied together by faith or religion or something that I guess can unite us like that. But for us, I think that food is the one thing that ties us together. I think in relation to mental health or shared issues, like you can connect with other people through food. Like parents may not tell you that they love you, but they'll always like bring you food, and in a way that's a form of connecting with your culture.
I think the strengths and values within my community, we always united no matter what. We always generous when someone's in need. They would always like be there for each other.
Talk to someone you trust or someone who has more experience in dealing with such issues. That would be my only thing, like find someone you trust with actually experience in dealing with those stuff, and then you share your experience too.
What about if you feel like you don't have anyone that you trust that you could go talk to?
So basically, one thing I did when I was coping through this with no one there was probably through my art craft. So mostly anything that I feel I'll probably try and convey through a canvas or a poetry, something like that, as a way of expressing whatever I'm going through.
I 100% agree. I used to draw and write as a way of like expressing my emotions, and it's a way of, I guess, dealing with mental health. So, because it does help, like instead of bottling it up, you're having it out on a canvas, you're like, I guess, thinking through your thoughts on paper, so it's not just like internalized the whole time. My message would be that it's okay to feel the feelings that you're feeling, and it's not shameful to experience these things. You should always try and be the best version of yourself. So part of that is seeking help and to make yourself feel better and improve your life.
Great. So it's a wonderful video, I think, for different reasons. First of all, it's reflective of a slightly younger generation, and I don't want to make assumptions of the average age of participants on the webinar today. but it's a great insight into that generation, but also from a cultural perspective. There certainly are still some taboos that are largely driven by the cultures and the way in which we have been or how we've grown up. So we would like to open the platform here and ask participants if there is anything they are comfortable to share in terms of perhaps some of the stigma around mental conditions, mental health, or how candid we can be, or how difficult it is based on how we've grown up or what the practices and cultural do's and don'ts are in terms of talking about mental health. Do we have Suresh on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Suresh.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, and you?
Good, thank you.
Suresh, is there any insights you can give us from this cultural perspective?
Well, I'm from India, and the Indian culture is mostly submissive to the elders. So we don't generally speak up or go against the elders, and we say we follow what they say and stuff like that. But that's probably the last generation. The current generation is moved on from that because of the education and exposure.
Yeah.
At the same time, the availability of information, internet and whatnot on your fingertips, even at a very small age, the little kids at school have started going through the mental illness issues, and we have schools who have mental programs and stuff like that. So we are definitely not immune to any of those mental issues that you spoke about. But what I can say is, from the culture point of view, we are taught to submit ourselves to the God every day and be thankful, do the prayers in front of the God. And the best thing that I can tell you today is about the physio-mental health that comes from following yoga and meditation. So from an Indian perspective, the biggest advantage we have is that we are brought up in an environment which is mostly inclusive of physical fitness by way of yoga or any other means. Could be gym in some of the cases, but mostly it is yoga. And the spiritual inclusiveness that is taught by our parents to us and from us to our children and so on and so forth. And the new techniques of coaching and stuff like that, those are also getting into the fray. But yeah, largely we balance due to our own culture and what have been taught to us by our parents.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing with us. You've got Tamara as a yoga coach here as well. So she prescribes to yoga as well. And that's it. Again, the holistic approach which Bob Rosen set out encompasses different solutions. It's maybe not a solution, it's a way of living for you. But it certainly gives us some insight. That's wonderful. There's another raised hand from Ndaleli. Please go ahead.
Ndaleli.
You can unmute yourself if you'd want to contribute. Okay, trying to unmute. We've got you. Okay.
While Zaneni is trying to unmute, can I just
Yes.
add something, Renee,
Sure.
to what Bob Rosen has added here, that a holistic approach, right? And there's two other dimensions that I want to share with, our colleagues, the audience today, which is your practical health, practicality. So by practicality, I mean making your life easy for yourself. Okay, for those that live in South Africa, and I know a few African countries, for example, we have something called load shedding, where we have to, have periods of no electricity. So we have to think ahead. When do I cook? When do I, as a woman, wash my hair and blow dry my hair if I need the hair dryer? When do I do the washing, right? Meal planning would fall under practicality. So think of that as another holistic approach that you can put there, is how do I make my life easier? How do I plan ahead? How do I make things a lot more smoother for myself? It's a planning aspect. And the other one I want to share here is the financial health. We must take into consideration financial wellness also plays a part in that holistic approach, making sure that your bills are paid, making sure that you're not spending beyond your means, making sure that you're planning for the future, planning for your children, that you're managing that budget and that expenses and making wise financial choices. So very similar to Rosin's framework is the wellness wheel, and happy to share that after this call, that you can share with the delegates, the colleagues that are on this call. And it literally encompasses those six, along with the financial and the practicality, and how you can goal plan towards all of these in order to have, so think of it as the wheel, right?
Yeah.
We have to do these ongoing strategies in order to have a holistic approach. It's an ongoing thing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay.
Danny, are you able to unmute now?
Yes,
I'm muted. Thank you.
Yeah. There we go.
I'm one of those people that grew up at a time when there was, shall I say, violence in the country, and our parents were not educated enough to understand what mental health was. So they swept everything underneath the carpet, and all they were worried about is our livelihoods. Much as I didn't grow up in South Africa, but it was just like that in other countries as well. As a Black person, you were looked down upon. You couldn't raise your voice. And just as a child, let's put it that way, children, during our times, they used to say, children should be seen, not heard. So you couldn't say anything to your parents or any other elderly person. And the gentleman that spoke earlier on touched on some of the things that I wanted to say. And I'm happy that now in this country, especially, we're able to accept what our children are going through. LGBT, and we accept it. And we say, look, it's your life as long as you respect yourself and other people around you. Then there was GBV as well, which is still in the country a lot. But people understand that GBV is not right. We grew up at a time when we'd see our parents being beaten by our fathers because, our mothers, and it was okay. I'm a man. I'm supposed to run the family, not running the family in the right way, understanding the other section, or rather your partner, but making decisions on your own. We are at a point now where we've changed, all of us. I'm married and I'm happy because we have changed. So life is getting better in South Africa,
We didn't even have. Sorry, Jared.
Sorry. No, go ahead, and I'll chime in after you.
Okay, I'm just mindful of time. We didn't even have a term, really. There wasn't a label for gender-based violence, so it wasn't defined as such. There weren't campaigns around it. So we're certainly making strides, but I think there is still the need for the individual to feel comfortable and secure enough to be able to speak up. And rightfully so, perhaps the younger generation, as we saw in the video, are more willing to do so versus perhaps us who grew up and are very largely influenced by our upbringing. Jared?
Thanks, Monet. So, and Lenny, what I want to do, just add in, weigh in with on what you were saying, is you really pointed out that silence itself helps capacitate ill mental health. So one of the things that we are going to be talking about in a little while really is about communication, and how communication, either the lack of it or too much of it, can actually impact on our mental health. And in your parents' generation, I'm presuming you're probably my generation, which is Generation X, or maybe even a bit younger. Okay, parents kept quiet, whether it was if it was gender-based violence or other issues that were being handled, you didn't air your laundry out in public. And not being able to physically have someone other than the family to talk to caused certain challenges. Now we have a younger generation. We have millennials, the younger millennials I'm talking about, and then we have Generation Z, and we are seeing the highest prevalences of stress, burnout, disengagement, depression, bipolar mood disorder that we have ever seen, even worse than in the silent generation of the 1920s. And it's almost that there's too much freedom, and people are being bombarded with so much communication, so it's almost like that there's a stimulus overload, and we are creatures of moderation. And the idea is to try and moderate all of these so that we are able to truly engage properly and connect properly with those people within our environment. I'm not going to overspeak right now because I know we are short on time, but
yeah. But so important. So thank you for that contribution as well. You can see on the current slide, we have given you some information regarding the financial implications and the available research out there to quantify this in the workplace. I think it is very important for the board and senior management teams to understand and to contribute to available research in different countries to quantify the impact. Where you aren't able to participate, then make use of these research papers. But healthcare spending due to workplace burnout is anywhere between $125 billion and $190 billion. The replacement cost for the average worker is 1/2 to 2 times the annual salary. So you have an existing workforce. It's like any resource you'd have. If you don't take care of your resource, it is going to deplete, it is going to diminish. And people are resources in our workplace. And if we don't take care of our people, they too will diminish. And there's a cost associated to replace them. So what is that turnover cost? And to what extent is poor mental health and the factors in the workplace impacting the turnover within your business? And are you tracking that in any way? Then $9 trillion was lost due to disengagement, stress, and burnout and related conditions in the 2022 Gallup poll. So there are interesting stats. You can always come back again. The active links are in the slide deck. Let's just quickly look at what are mental health conditions. This is not the only list, an exhaustive list, but it is good for us to start putting certain labels to what are mental health conditions. So it includes anxiety disorders, depression, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, neurodevelopmental disorders such as ADHD, attention deficit hyperintensity, autism spectrum, burnout. Burnout, if you ask some of the qualified health practitioners, They won't necessarily classify it as a mental health illness per se, but it is a phenomenon that is increasing year on year in our workplaces. So it's chronic workplace stress that is not being managed, and that leads to burnout. And then I just wanted to talk about pain. Is pain a mental health illness? No. But do we understand that chronic pain can lead potentially to a mental health condition, such as depression? So you may have an employee in the workplace that says, oh, Tim, I'm really struggling. I've got back pain. And you know this about a colleague. Colleague suffers from back pain. But, what am I supposed to do? It's back pain. Okay. I don't really see the link here. How can I help you? But it's chronic, it's persistent, it continues over a period of time, and ultimately pain can be so excruciating that it starts to impact the mood and the emotions of people. And now we're starting to veer into that world of mental well-being, not feeling well, potentially leading to depression. So when an employee says, listen, I have back pain, the response from the employer should be, what can we do to assist you? What can we do to alleviate the pain? Because whatever brought it on, that's not the question. The question is, what do we do internally to help you overcome and to work through that pain, or to present some solutions in the workplace that will reduce that pain? It says here 40% of people with back pain also have depressive disorders. There is clearly a link to that. Tim, go ahead. You're on mute.
It's a very real thing at the moment. My wife has just had a back op, and the pain she's been in has definitely affected her mentally. She's been very depressed, housebound, lonely, all of those kind of things. It's in a very short space of time became quite a big mental impact.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Jared?
So I think what you mentioned, that burnout is not really in, well, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, DSM-5.
Yeah.
However, part of the reason for that is it's a combination of several different types of issues that we experience.
Correct.
Physical,
Yes.
mental, emotional, even our purpose. Some people will call it spiritual, but it's not really spiritual, because not everyone really relates to that. But it's what gives us that sense of joy, that sense of passion. So when these are out of balance, what we actually are experiencing is what I call the law of entropy. It's chaos. And we get to a point where we are, you're showing the stress curve right now. and tomorrow is also going to want to talk about this as well. But we're on that slippery red slope, okay? And when our physical, our mental, our cognitive, and our purpose-driven aspects are all out of sync, we're unable to respond until the energy that we put in is greater than the pain we're experiencing. And that's the law of entropy. So it really says everything's in chaos. How do we get it into order? We've got to create more energy than the chaos energy that we are experiencing. And it's far easier when you're in the orange, which is still when we're experiencing exhaustion. But ideally, we want to be in that optimal stress sort of place between, in the yellow there. Sorry, I am colorblind. It's a stressor for me and for other people. But very important. We don't want to lose our stress. We don't want to be in a state of what we call eustress, which is the green, because then we don't have anything to drive us. And I think when it comes to excos and senior management level decisions that need to be made, you need to initiate the drive in people, and they need to maintain it. It's not about continuously micromanaging. A board is not there to do that. A board is there to strategically place a target in front of you, and then you continue. So you want to build enough stress into the system so that people are able to continue in a positive way.
Yeah.
Tamara, you wanted to add in?
Yeah, I actually want to add on the previous slide where we were talking about those mental health diseases, right? So most of these are seen as invisible diseases, and I just want to touch on that quickly. There are other types of diseases, okay, where you don't see that the person is ill, like celiac disease, Crohn's disease, lupus, fibromyalgia, right? So just something to consider, you can't see that pain that person is in. And if there's been a diagnosis of a chronic illness, that comes with its own sets of stresses for the individual. So I'm going to share. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in 2014, working in a corporate background. I would have extreme pain and upset tummy, and I would avoid eating in the workplace because if I ate, my stomach was sore, and then I would go to the bathroom and then I would disappear, and it was just so stressful for me. But I didn't feel safe enough. I couldn't tell my manager at the time that this is what I was going through. And this is my example. How many people, your staff, employees are managing illnesses that are invisible, that they can't disclose, or they don't feel safe enough? Well, maybe mention the psychological safety that they can speak up and say, I've just been diagnosed with this. And again, it goes back to your question is, how can the business now, the board, the managers, the leaders, support that person with that chronic illness that they've just, been diagnosed? That's what I wanted to touch on.
I think
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I just want to add one more thing in there, just tying in with Tamara, is that there are a lot of non-notifiable diseases.
Yeah.
And some of those, by not being notifiable, causes a huge amount of conflict in the individual, but within the organization as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Burnout, do you want to just speak, colleagues, to our burnout, our job resources versus job demands?
Yeah, Jared, you and I can talk on this together. We're really having a conversation around this. So, yeah, I mean, the idea here is this graph talks about the job resources, so the resources you make available to that employee versus the demands of the job. Okay, now where there's low job resources and a low job demand, there's going to be a bit of apathy. Okay, when there is resources available to you, right, and there are enough demands, you can manage those demands, you're engaged, so say low to high, you're engaged, you can do the work, you've got the oomph to do what you need to do. But now when the resources are low in that position, so let's say you're doing 2 to 3 people's jobs, right? There isn't enough support from your managers. Maybe you're working that extra weekends all the time, going on holiday and taking your laptop with you. So there's, you're really in that stress curve, and the job demands is too high, that red area, that's where the burnout occurs. You're actually at a stage where exhaustion, and if you go back to the previous Monet, if I may, is that exhaustion. You'll see also the correlation here between performance and the stress level. So if you look at the green again, that is your laid back comfort zone, right? Your performance will increase. You want to be at that optimum stage, right? You might get a little bit tired. You might get exhausted. Now, at that point, that's where we want to start implementing these stress management tools, techniques, whatever it is, to help the person not reach that and panic, anxiety. And you'll see the performance, because what happens when you are stressed, cognitively, you lose access to that prefrontal cortex. So you make more mistakes, you miss numbers, you miss the detail within an email, within a request from the board or the CEO. So just be mindful is that performance will decrease.
That's a slippery slope.
Slippery slope.
Yeah.
Slippery, slippery slope.
I want to. I see there's been a question from Amakura. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Where will we be touching on the triggers to a lot of these invisible diseases, and to put it bluntly, toxic leaders? So, just to if you look at the 4 quadrants that we have here, high job demands, high job resources. While we are seeing the benefits of engagement, we are seeing those Sunday night workers, those people who are putting in 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Okay. And typical examples of those are industries where they work on a billing system, such as your big law firms. Now, often those come with individuals who can be highly encouraging, but also highly toxic. And what we ultimately are looking for is that engagement where the business is obviously profiting, the business is seeing all the benefits of the people within it, but those people are feeling engaged, but not to the point of burnout. They are reasonably stressed, if I can put that. Okay. Now, often we find in climates like we're experiencing throughout the world right now, we're in a post-COVID climate. Everyone thought COVID will be over and suddenly everything will just go back to normal. But we are still dealing with the economic crises. We're dealing with the issue of, do we work from home? Do we work hybrid? Do we work in the workplace? And that is causing a huge amount of toxicity as well, similar to what you've raised, Amakura. So the whole point is really, how do we understand each other to the point that we are providing the resources that are necessary? How do we make the demands just enough that the person is pushed to the point of just wanting to get to that next level? And although we don't have an article on it, I just wanted to mention one of the big private banks in this country that has actually done something along those lines. I don't know if I can mention who they are, but what they've done is they've done away with asking for leave. And what they have done is they've said, you have outcomes. Those outcomes need to be met. You need to schedule that yourself. And what they're doing is they're actually seeing a happier workforce than they've ever seen, because they're not saying you have your 18 or 21 days in the year. Now we are getting to the point where people actually feel heard and understood and allowed to express themselves.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to move to Tim. I'm just mindful of time. You've got a raised hand.
Yes, just very quickly. I was at the conference last week and they were talking about the alpha and beta brain states. But what I found fascinating was if you stay in beta for more than 5 years, your brain never shuts down.
Oh my goodness.
So you don't recover when you're on holiday. You can take 3 weeks leave and you're still not going to unwind and start thinking differently, because alpha is that relaxed but awake exploratory stage, which means it kills innovation, it kills all kinds of processes that would otherwise happen. And then you're definitely going to move more and more towards burnout because you cannot turn it off.
Yeah. I can identify a couple of leaders already, and that makes a lot of sense, because I've always questioned, why can't they turn it off? And obviously they've been in that state for such a prolonged period, it's too difficult to turn it off.
Yeah.
All right. We have symptoms of burnout. We're going to leave the deck with you, and we're going to invite you to come back and look at these symptoms to see if you identify. If you identify, don't worry, don't stress about it. It's a good thing. If you identify and you pick up on these symptoms, at least you are able to confront yourself with the reality of where you are. And that was the biggest struggling block I had. I was known to be a detailed person, a hard worker, a single mom, and I wore that badge very proudly. And one of the most difficult things for me was the fact that I had to acknowledge that I'm not coping. And that again stems, and the team can tell you about personality types as well. And I'm an OCD, perfectionist, etc., etc. but have a look at the symptoms. It is important. It's like you going for a physical checkup. You need to do that. There's another poll. Let's quickly do our poll, and we are mindful of time. If you are able to continue to stay around, please do so. If you have other commitments, we assure you that we are recording and you have the benefit of the recording as well. But have a look. The first question, are you comfortable to discuss mental health? And the second question, have you ever or are you experiencing anxiety or depression? Again, it's very anonymous, so we won't pull up any names, but it gives you a little bit of, it gives us a little bit of insight into the prevalence as well. We'll pop up the results here when they are ready. So Tamara spoke about invisible disabilities. And we have to be on the lookout. And the lookout means we just have to be aware that they exist. And we have to communicate to our employees within the workplace that we still invite them to come forward, even if it's something we cannot see. Under the Employment Equity Act in South Africa, we know that if you have a physical, mental, sensory, intellectual disability, we must, by law in South Africa, reasonably accommodate your needs. The employer must step up and say, right, employee, how best can I support you? And I think that should be a universal approach, irrespective if governance dictates it or not. We wanted to also, because this is slanted more towards leadership board level as well, we want to talk about the company's regulations, specific for South African colleagues as well. You know, the first function that the Social and Ethics Committee must fulfill is to monitor the company's activities in 5 designated areas. One of them is labor and employment. So that mandate extends into the labor and employment sphere. And when we look at, we look at the company's regulations within the workplace, we look at employee safety and health. It's not only physical safety and health. It certainly includes mental wellness and well-being of staff. It's that psychological well-being Tamara mentioned earlier. Under King as well, we have to look at employee safety and health. I keep wanting to say wealth, but I think healthy employees contributes to the wealth of employers in any case. So it is certainly within the mandate of the Social and Ethics Committee. We're not really introducing a new responsibility and a new role to be played. It's just emphasizing it and really thinking about the framework and the strategy we are able to implement. Now, this is a mind map just for us to make a start at looking at ways in which we can improve within this area. And the first thing we want to do is discovery. Are we collecting the necessary information to understand the prevalence within our own workplaces? Are we conducting the exit interviews to ask the necessary questions that may create a better work environment, a better culture where we are more supportive of employees with mental health conditions? Our leadership training and onboarding. You know, I had a connection with Tamara and Jared last week, and we spoke about the type of person needed to lead others, the type of person that should be in a management role. And you're going to have 2 types of people. You're going to have people where it comes naturally. They have a natural ability to show empathy. They have a natural ability to connect and effectively communicate with people. And they will more easily be able to pick up if they are mental conditions challenges. But you also have leaders that have more technical capabilities that are perhaps stronger on the strategic side of things and not so in tune on the human element and side of things. Both of them need to be developed within this space. So as a board, look at what you can do in terms of discovery, but also how you can better equip your people, your managers of others to lead you. Let's pull up the poll results. Are you comfortable to discuss? Excellent. 84% of you say yes. Still a few colleagues that say no. Have you ever or are you experiencing anxiety or depression?
Sure.
78% on the call today. I mean, we can almost leave it there. I don't think, we don't want to leave it there, but it certainly tells us this is absolutely important. And the strategy is the next step, the way forward. Flexible support. What is it within that organization through its policies, its procedures, its supporting platforms through mental healthcare professionals? What do we make available? Do we need to spend more money on it, invest more money? Do we need to ensure that we democratize it, it's accessible to all? You've got to look at the framework in terms of policies and procedures and investment. And then the culture piece. The culture piece is largely influenced through the people managing our teams. So Tamara and Jared have provided us with some additional research here. What are some of these strategies we want to take forward with you? We want to look at providing stress management interventions, how we want to explore how you can allow employees to craft their own work, cultivate social support, engage employees in decision-making, implement high-quality performance management, and create an inclusive, democratized approach in coaching. So we'll come back to this. I just want to, what we are presenting to you here ties in with 3 stages of prevention. Prevention is better than cure, but cure is good. You can make your way back up on that slippery slope. You can do it. But if you are finding yourself on that tipping point, there are primary and secondary prevention interventions you can run. Limit exposure to work-related hazards. Limit stress and burnout, improve self-care. But these 2 levels, including the tertiary level, is what we are presenting to you as further strategies and solutions. So we want to, as a next step, offer workshops where we can really delve into the how we do it, the step-by-step process. So we'll offer interventions that is customized to organizations, which is focused on HR practitioners and managers of others. We focus on the 5R, which is restore, revitalize, regulate, reinvigorate, reconnect. It's a program that Tamara and Jared are brilliant at presenting, both to managers and employees, individuals alike. But we have to go in to really understand what is going to drive behavioral change in organizations. It can't be interventions that we workshop and then we hope for the best. You need to have awareness, which we're doing today. Then you move from awareness into training, workshop, capacitate, teach people. And then after that, it needs to move and lend itself into a behavioral change. So let me pause here, check in my colleagues if they want to highlight anything here to our audience. Go ahead, Tamara, Jared.
And also post your questions in the chat box. Specific questions.
That would be great.
If you can go to the next slide, I think we can just touch on 1 or 2, Jared and Renee, just because of time. Would you? So, I'm happy to go. Yeah, Jared, you go first. Age before beauty. Now you know he's older than we.
Thank you. I'm sure that was given away before. So very important is, while we are not psychologists, we can use a cognitive behavioral type way of intervening, and our minds are really where our stress sits in most people. How it then plays out is in our body, in our emotions, etc., etc. But and Suresh touched on this earlier. Why are so many people in India exhibiting a more stress-free sort of lifestyle? Because they practice various forms of meditation or mindfulness, yoga, where the mind and the body meet. That is where we're finding that people are coming to terms or handling their stress, managing their stress, beating the burnout. And once that happens, what we are finding is that people are looking at those 4 areas that I mentioned before, cognitive, the physical, the purpose-driven, and the emotional, and they are able to actually connect themselves more internally and then with others. And that itself leads to the whole communication aspect. And this ongoing stress management, as Monet just said, it is an ongoing process. It is something that we are always working on, something that we always need to improve on. Okay,
right.
So yeah, I'm happy to maybe just touch on one of those 6 aspects. So let's go to allowing employees to craft their work. It's the next one. So here, what we're wanting to share with everyone on the call is allow your staff to be autonomous, to be flexible, and hone in on their skills, right? Their strengths in order to do what they're good at. And if they're not the right person for that specific position, look at interventions where you can put them in different departments. So align that staff's strength, right? So best fit, best role fit, and understand also what motivates your staff. And this goes back to the behavioral side of individuals. We're talking about the profiles of individuals. Some people are motivated by an email. Others are motivated by money. Others are motivated by, a Takealot voucher. And try different things to get your staff motivated. We've got a couple of examples here from a South African perspective where Investec, I'm going to mention, they offered in unlimited amounts of leave to their staff, flexible work hours. They found different ways to give that power back, that flexibility and that autonomy to that employee. And we need to look at different ways to allow that employee to be responsible for their role. There's also motivations and perks from Google. I know not most businesses can do with the Google way of things, but it can be little things. It can be little things. They can motivate. And these strategies are really for you as a manager. Think ahead of how you can develop your staff for the skills you see in them that you want to grow and develop. And our last point, we talk about democratized coaching and personal development, just like democratizing the mental health or awareness. We also need to develop our employees from that physical, emotional. Let's go back to that wheel. Then you've got the occupational side. Make people know that you value them, whether it's from their emotional or their journey in that occupational. Okay. So I don't know if Jared wants to chat on 1 or 2 items. I'm mindful of time as well.
Yeah, just 1-2 words on that last one, on the democratizing of coaching. So coaching itself has, it's the 6th one, I think.
The last
one.
Yeah.
So what's happened with coaching works really well at senior management levels, at the exco, because that's where the money has been spent. Now, what it has done is it's created a case of haves and have-nots in the organization. And that mindset is what is actually causing a sense of stress, of lack of understanding between the employee base and then the management and leadership base. So finding ways to democratize coaching or personal development. We just use the term coaching, but it's really about, is the organization, is the management, is the leadership able to invest back into their people? And that's what the consideration really needs to be at a board level. And it's not just for your HR, the HR executive member or non-executive member to manage. It affects finance. It affects operations. It affects marketing. It affects absolutely every component at the board level.
Brilliant. Thank you, team. That is it, unless there are any questions, any remarks from you, Tim?
No questions on the list, but it's been very interesting how a lot of things I've read, things I've heard, and events I've attended in the last few weeks are all saying this or telling the same story, but from different perspectives. And it seems to be what worked for me was linking it to how we've moved in terms of industry. So we went from physical strength being the most important thing to mental capacity and strength being the most important thing. But now we keep pushing the accelerator on these things, and we're getting to the limit of what our mental capacities can actually uphold. Now we've got to go back and actually take a lot of learning from the Indian model. We've got to look at the whole body and be much more conscious of when it's starting to get to the point where it's not working effectively. And Western culture, it's still a taboo to say that you meditate. It's still a massive taboo to say that you get help, or you see a psychologist, or you have a therapist, or even to have a coach. So yes, democratizing all these things is massively important. And I've seen that in an educational establishment that I work with, where they've done a lot of mental support and life skills support, et cetera, as part of the curriculum. And it's massively transformed the effectiveness of the students in the programs. So thank you. It's been really, really useful. The stats are always useful to wake up and scare boards of directors, but this is actually important. So yes, you've given us lots of tools, and I'm really, really pleased we organized this. So thank you.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you to Tamara and Jared. We are certainly available, and we'll continue to provide solutions, even if it's just an introduction to a solution that can be further developed within the workplace, within each of your cultures. But we'll share the slides and we'll share the recording, and wish everybody a good rest of the day.